Dinner went fine, and Sisveta let Zanatla and Mira know how much time they had before he needed to present Mira to the council and where he could meet her.
It won't take us much time to do this, now that we have already done it once. I will make sure Mira is there on time.
They headed to the technician's supply closet and signed out a new portable for Mira. Zanatla had known they would be working in the docking bay, so had not brought her own portable, as it would be useless while there. She also picked up a new tool set that she would be able to replace the docking bay's set they had to destroy, as well as the parts she had needed for the setup. Once she had them in hand, they headed back to Mira's ship. What had taken a few hours to do before was now able to be done in a half hour, now that everything they needed to get to before was exposed and prepped. Zanatla was also able to show Mira the distress signal beacon. Zanatla explained how the navigation systems they had copied wouldn't work without this part.
That makes sense. I knew there were things we didn't understand how or why they worked, but that they had to be included in order to make the ship work. It was good to get that mystery resolved.
They spent a little time in the Discovery chatting more and getting a better understanding of each other's culture. When it was time to meet up with the captain, they went.
How did you like meeting your counterpart technician?
Sisveta asked.
It was different. In some ways, it was like being a new engineer working with an old pro who has worked on everything. But in others, it was like working with a normal peer. It was fun to be able to both learn and teach, even if what I was teaching was ancient to her.
I am glad you enjoyed each other's company. I could tell that Zanatla was having a good time.
They were now heading off of the ship. They were at the very end of any species that would enter the building. The first to go in would be the nocturnal. They would enter the council chambers first, and they had a special enclosure within the chamber that had very low lighting within it, and the exterior of it was made of darkened glass. This allowed the daytime species to still be able to see while keeping the nocturnals safe from the bright light. Once they were settled, they would press a button that would raise the lighting and make a tone outside the chamber, alerting everyone else they could enter. Mira and Sisveta would be waiting until they were specifically called in to speak. Because this was an emergency meeting, they didn't need to wait while other business was talked about, so it was only a few minutes after the meeting began that they were brought in. There was a dais at the open end of a horseshoe-shaped stadium seating chamber. There were many species here, but there weren't so many rows that anyone became hard to see.
Sisveta, son of Stadal, captain of the Galactic Federation destroyer Black Hole, please tell of the events that have brought you and this new alien species to this council meeting.
Commanded the speaker. The speaker was very tall and spindly-looking. She had 4 spider-like legs and 2 more limbs that acted like arms. Her head didn't have a discernible nose, had 4 obsidian-colored eyes, and her mouth had little tiny arms in front of it like a crab. Sisveta had shown her pictures of the speaker as well as the members of the council that tended to speak more as well as their names and species names. While Sisveta spoke, Mira racked her mind. She's a Quix. And her name is Chris? No, that's the name of the Juten. But it was similar, wasn't it? Syrixa. That was it. Sisveta had mentioned that the Quix all have an X in their name. Well, he called it an SSS, I think. Mira focused back on what Sisveta was saying while looking at the assembled council. She noticed small shifts here and there. When he said where Mira came from, she could see more glances towards her as well as open stares. She also noticed a few outright smirks. Compared to some of these aliens, she certainly didn't look like anything to write home about. He also directed them to look at their own portables as Mira's diagnostics had been sent to everyone. Mira could tell they had not looked at it prior to now. Politicians are the same, everywhere it seems. There were several more species looking at her more closely, looking down at their portables, and then back up at Mira.
Are these readings accurate, Captain Sisveta?
That one is Chris. Mira smiled.
They were taken by my chief medical officer, Clarud. All of the chemical analysis is correct. However, the endurance and strength testing are likely incorrect.
There were visible signs of relief. And then Esizveta completed the sentence.
Because she had already been awake for roughly 20 hours, with little rest or nourishment due to having to make repairs to her ship's life support systems. Alone.
There were a few gasps and other noises of disbelief.
Due to other concerns, we did not feel a need to make her go through the testing again.
Other concerns?
Chris asked. Sizveta then told them where Mira was headed prior to the ship being damaged. This caused many noises of outrage and even accusations that the humans were joining the Imperia. To this, Sizveta pulled out his portable, tapped in a few commands, and then on a large screen behind her and the captain that she hadn't noticed upon entering was a recording of that encounter from when Mira showed Klarud where she was heading until Sizveta referred to her as a skeetling neglecting her sleep cycle.
Mira does not know if her government knows about the aliens hiding on their planet or not. I do know from what Mira has told me, the Imperia have set up a scrambler which has blocked any Federation ships from picking up Earth signals and Earth from picking up any foreign signals. Mira states that they thought it was what they refer to as a natural wonder and even named it.
He sighed and then continued.
There is more. One of my engineers was helping Mira to have access to her ship records and stumbled upon an Empyrean infection trap. We were lucky that we only lost a portable, some electronics, 3 belts, and a tool set. We are here seeking guidance for the humans. Under Federation law, I remind you that Mira is not a government official, negotiator, ambassador, or is in any way a voice for the human species. She can only speak for herself and speak through her own experiences.
He stepped a few paces to the side to allow Mira to take the center of the dais. She knew that Sizveta had said that, at the end as a reminder that nothing she said could be used as a binding agreement for her whole species. Sizveta had made sure she knew what her rights were, what they were allowed to ask, and what he would need to tell them. It was Mira who has suggested the recording when she learned about the slaver races. One of the first things Klarud had told her was that all that was said or did in the medical bay was recorded, so that if any misunderstandings happened, there was proof of all that occurred.
Are your species one government or many?
Asked a species as Veda had not prepped her for. Mira would have called it mammalian. There was certainly hair. It looked like it might reach her collarbone in height. 2 legs, 2 arms, no tail. The nose was a bit flatter, like how a capuchin monkey's nose was. The hair was short and covered its entire body to the point that if it had clothing of any kind, it was not visible. Even George Lucas did not prepare me for this.
We have many countries that each have their own government, but most of those governments belong to a United Nations. The United Nations is not a ruling body, but they help to maintain peace between countries during disputes. They can also apply pressure on their members to end situations that the rest of the members don't agree with.
There were other questions that were to clarify the test results, as well as questions about population.
I do not know the current population of the Earth, or even of just my own country.
Questions about military.
I am not authorized to speak about the militaries of any country on my planet.
How long humans had been exploring space.
Through telescopes, several centuries, but physically, approximately 100 years.
She was allowed to move back to where Sizveta stood. They were both excused while the council debated with each other. The hall was quiet. Mira grasped her hands so that it would not be as obvious she was coming down from an adrenaline rush.
How are you feeling?
Sizveta tasted the air.
Nervous. I don't usually have to speak in front of so many people.
You get used to it when you lead. It was very nerve-wracking when I commanded my first ship. Unless you crash the ship, no one remembers the little mistakes. I was very happy when I didn't crash the ship.
They chuckled together. It seemed to take nearly the entire time allotted to the council meeting, but it was decided that Sizveta would meet with another Federation captain whose crew was peopled by other species who were all from Class Black home worlds, and Mira would be transferred to them. This crew's captain would be authorized to act as ambassador. As they walked back to the ship, Mira's portable beeped, which notified her that there was an incoming communication from her ship. Sisveta guided her into an empty room so that she could answer it. Once inside, Mira took a deep breath and then answered, glad it was only a recording. Commander Morris was red-faced with anger.
Chief Rodriguez, how dare you desecrate the bodies of your colleagues? You're a goddamned machinist, mate, and you're telling me you couldn't seal off a room and drop the temperature to preserve them.
He went on in this vein for a few more minutes and then ended with,
I want a full report of damages to the ship and how you have conducted yourself. See that I don't speak with your commanding officer and have you bumped down to a base engineering aide.
When the video went out, Mira scoffed.
The ventilation system would have needed a reroute in order to do what he said, and I would have had to fabricate the parts from scratch with zero materials. I was lucky I was able to repair the life support systems from scratch with what I had on board.
He is not your commanding officer?
For this mission, he is. When we first started to go into space, they used members of our military with flight experience. Since then, NASA trained their own people. As we started unlocking and reverse engineering the crashed vessel, a new branch of military was created. However, this voyage was not a military voyage, but an exploratory voyage. NASA can bring some of the greatest engineers together, and they do. But for this voyage, they wanted an engineer that could think on their feet should there be emergencies. I am a member of a branch that deals in the kind of ships that are in water, not air or even space. However, a naval engineer must be able to think on their feet. I tested among the highest with a number of tests, like my ability to not lose my lunch under higher G-forces. Being as small as I am helped, too. A larger person would have a harder time getting into some of the spaces on the ship.
Small?
This was not a topic that had come up. It was also fairly rude to ask a new species if they were the runts of the litter. Mira laughed.
Humans come in all sorts of sizes. I'm on the shorter end of that spectrum. My fiancé has about a foot on me.
Sisveta was confused, so she showed with her hands.
He's about this much taller than I am.
He? I don't understand. A word didn't translate. You're what?
Oh. If two humans like each other and decide they want to permanently live with one another, they will announce an engagement. The people in that engagement refer to each other as their fiancé. We both got permission from our commanding officers, so we will get married soon. We were planning on after this mission to get together to go over details better and finally set a date.
That sounds complicated,
Sisveta replied.
It can be.
She agreed.
Hey everyone, hope you loved the video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe for more awesome sci-fi content. And if you're feeling generous, check out our Ko-Fi page to support the channel. Every bit helps us bring you more stories from the stars. Thanks a bunch.